The Alaskan wilderness is a place of extremes, a land where winter can stretch endlessly and temperatures plummet to levels most people can hardly comprehend. For the unprepared, it's a death sentence. But Adam wasn't unprepared. He had spent years trekking, climbing, and surviving in some of the harshest conditions on Earth. By all accounts, he knew exactly what he was doing. Yet, on one bitterly cold January morning, Adam set out on a solo expedition and vanished. For weeks, search and rescue teams scoured the forest, the mountains, and the frozen rivers near his last known location. They found nothing. No gear, no campsite, no tracks in the snow. Not even a single clue as to where he might have gone. It was as if he had simply ceased to exist. For 4 years, Adam's disappearance became a haunting mystery. His family refused to give up, clinging to the hope that maybe somehow he had survived. Then one day, their prayers were answered. Or so it seemed. 4 years after he vanished, Adam was found walking along a desolate highway, miles from any civilization. He was alive, but not well. His face was gaunt, his clothes were in tatters, and his eyes carried the weight of something unspeakable. He muttered strange, fragmented phrases about the forest, about being followed, about something that wouldn't let him leave. But the most chilling part of Adam's return wasn't his condition. It was what he couldn't explain. 4 years of his life were gone, replaced with memories he refused to share and scars that no one could identify. What happened to Adam in the frozen wilds of Alaska? Was it simply the brutal force of nature, or something far stranger? How far would you go to uncover the truth about a terrifying legend, knowing it might cost you your sanity, or worse, your life? To understand what happened to Adam, you must first understand the place where it all began. The Alaskan wilderness is a realm few truly comprehend. It is vast and unyielding, stretching endlessly in every direction, a landscape carved by time and frozen in silence. Winter here is not just a season, it is a force. The sun barely rises during these months, casting a pale gray light that fades almost as soon as it appears. Temperatures drop so low that exposed skin can freeze in minutes, and the wind cuts through layers of clothing like a knife. But the most unnerving thing about this place isn't the cold, it's the stillness. Here, sound feels different. The snow absorbs every footstep, every rustle of movement, until all that remains is an almost suffocating quiet. In this silence, every noise becomes amplified. The crack of a distant branch, the whisper of wind through the trees. It's a quiet that plays tricks on your mind, that makes you feel like you're being watched, even when you're alone. And in the forest near Silver Ridge, that silence feels heavier, oppressive even, as though the trees themselves are listening. Silver Ridge is not the kind of place you end up by accident. It sits miles away from the nearest highway, accessible only by a single winding road that's often buried under feet of snow. The town is small, barely more than a cluster of houses, a gas station, and a general store. Most of the residents are loggers or trappers, people who have lived off the land for generations. It's a quiet, self-reliant community where everyone knows everyone. But ask anyone in Silver Ridge about the forest, and their tone changes. The forest doesn't like strangers, they'll tell you. Some will laugh it off as a joke, but most won't. They'll warn you not to wander too far, not to go in after dark, and above all, not to ignore the whispers if you hear them. Because once the forest starts calling, it doesn't let go. The forest surrounding Silver Ridge has been the subject of stories for centuries. Long before the town existed, the native Athabascan tribes spoke of this place with a mix of reverence and fear. They called it the Lost Wood, a place where the spirits of the land roamed freely and where humans were not welcome. Hunters who entered the forest were said to hear voices, soft, indistinct, but undeniably real. These voices would lead them deeper into the trees, luring them away from safety. Some would return days later, dazed and disoriented, unable to remember where they had been. Others were never seen again. Over time, these stories evolved into a legend, the legend of the Shadow of the Pines. According to the tale, the forest is home to something ancient, something that watches and waits. It is said to appear as a shadow, moving through the trees, always just out of sight. Those who see it are marked, and from that moment on, the forest becomes their prison. No matter how far they run, they always find themselves back where they started. The longer they stay, the more the forest takes from them. First, their sense of direction, then their strength, and finally, their mind. When Adam arrived in Silver Ridge, he had no reason to believe in these stories. To him, they were just folklore, the kind of superstitions that small towns cling to. He had spent years trekking through dangerous terrain and surviving against the odds. The forest was just another challenge, a test of his skills and endurance. He didn't listen to the warnings. He didn't believe the whispers. But the people of Silver Ridge knew better. They had seen what happens to those who underestimate the forest. They had watched hikers and hunters disappear, only to reappear months or years later, broken and unrecognizable, or not at all. They didn't talk about it openly, but the fear was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. When Adam failed to return, his family and friends immediately raised the alarm. Within days, search and rescue teams descended on Silver Ridge, equipped with dogs, drones, and even helicopters. They combed the forest in grids, leaving no stone unturned. But no matter how hard they looked, there was nothing to find. Not a single track in the snow, not a single clue as to what had happened. The search team's radio communications were plagued with static, and some reported strange malfunctions with their equipment, compasses spinning aimlessly, GPS devices losing signal. But what unsettled the search teams the most was the forest itself. It felt wrong. The deeper they went, the quieter it became, until even the dogs refused to move forward. One tracker later described it as a silence that felt alive, like the forest was waiting for something. After 3 weeks of searching, the rescue effort was called off. Officially, Adam was declared missing, presumed dead. Unofficially, the people of Silver Ridge believed he had been taken, claimed by the forest, just like so many before him. For 4 long years, Adam's family held on to hope. But as time passed, even they began to accept the possibility that he was gone. And then, just as suddenly as he had vanished, Adam came back. He emerged from the wilderness like a ghost, alive but irrevocably changed. What happened to him during those missing years, and what secrets did the forest reveal to him? Secrets too terrifying to speak of. Adam's story might have ended with his return from the wilderness, but it was only the beginning for Sam Bennett, a journalist whose curiosity would lead him straight into the heart of the mystery. Sam wasn't the kind of person to accept the official version of events. A seasoned investigative reporter with a knack for uncovering hidden truths, he was drawn to the inexplicable like a moth to a flame. To him, Adam's disappearance and reappearance weren't just unusual, they were a story waiting to be told. Sam had built a reputation for digging into cases no one else would touch. Cold cases, urban legends, and unsolved mysteries. He had exposed corrupt officials, debunked hoaxes, and even unearthed forgotten crimes. But this story was different. When he read about Adam's return, he felt an inexplicable pull. There was something about the details, or rather, the lack of them, that didn't sit right with him. Adam wasn't talking to the media, and the reports of his condition were vague at best. The authorities seemed eager to close the case, chalking it up to a freak survival story. But Sam knew better. A man doesn't disappear for 4 years in a place as hostile as the Alaskan wilderness and come back without scars, physical or otherwise. And the rumors coming out of Silver Ridge, they were more than enough to pique his interest. When Sam arrived in Silver Ridge, he was met with a cold reception. The locals weren't eager to talk, and most avoided him altogether. But there was one exception. An elderly man named Walter Grady, who had lived in the town his entire life. Walter had seen more than his share of disappearances, and was one of the few willing to share what he knew, though his words offered little comfort. "You're not the first outsider to come poking around here," he told Sam. "But I'll tell you what I tell all of them. You don't go into those woods, not unless you've got a death wish. There's something in there, something that doesn't like being disturbed. You can call it a curse or a spirit or whatever you want, but it's real, and it doesn't let go once it has you." Sam wasn't ready to give up, and after days of persistence, he managed to convince a local ranger, Mike Hayes, to show him the forest where Adam had vanished. Mike was young, skeptical, and not one to entertain ghost stories. But even he admitted there was something about the woods that didn't feel right. "Look, I don't believe in curses or spirits or any of that nonsense," he told Sam. but I've been in those woods enough times to know they're strange. I've seen things I can't explain. Claw marks on trees, patches of snow that melt for no reason. And every so often, you'll get this feeling like you're not alone, like something's watching you. As Sam dug deeper, he began to notice a pattern. The people of Silver Ridge weren't just wary of the forest, they were protective of it. They avoided talking about Adam, and when they did, their words were carefully chosen, as though they were afraid of saying too much. It wasn't just superstition. It was fear. Sam's questions didn't sit well with the locals. Some warned him to leave. Others refused to speak to him altogether. And then there were the subtle threats. The way conversations would stop when he walked into a room. The lingering stares. The feeling that someone was following him. It became clear that the people of Silver Ridge weren't just hiding something. They were afraid of what might happen if he uncovered the truth. When Sam and Mike finally ventured into the forest, the atmosphere changed almost immediately. The air grew colder, and the silence became almost oppressive. As they moved deeper, Sam began to notice strange things. Marks on the trees that looked like claw scratches, too large to be from any known animal. In some areas, the snow had melted, leaving patches of bare earth surrounded by unbroken frost. And then there was the feeling. A prickling at the back of the neck, a sense of being watched. At one point, Sam thought he heard something, a faint whisper, just beyond the edge of hearing. He stopped, listening intently, but the sound was gone. Mike noticed his unease and shrugged it off, but Sam couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. What Sam didn't realize at the time was that he was already being drawn into the forest's grip. The deeper he went, the more the lines between reality and legend began to blur. And as he pushed forward determined to uncover the truth, he had no idea how high the cost would be. The forest was changing. At first it was subtle, the way the trees seemed taller, their branches denser, casting unnatural shadows even in daylight. But as Sam pressed deeper, it became harder to ignore. The air grew colder, the silence heavier, and the feeling that he was being watched became impossible to shake. For someone like Sam, who prided himself on logic and reason, it was an unsettling shift. He had come here to find answers, but the forest was offering none, only more questions. On their first night deep in the forest, Sam and Mike set up camp near a small clearing. The fire crackled weakly against the icy wind, and the two men spoke in hushed tones, their breath visible in the freezing air. As the night deepened, the forest seemed to come alive, not with the sounds of animals, but with something else entirely. It started faintly, almost imperceptible, a rustling in the distance, too rhythmic to be the wind. Then came the whispers, so soft and indistinct that Sam thought he might be imagining them. But when he glanced at Mike, he saw it in his eyes. He heard it too. Neither of them spoke about it that night, but both slept with their weapons close at hand. The next morning they packed up camp and continued their journey. The snow was fresh, untouched, and the sun barely pierced the thick canopy of trees overhead. It was Sam who first noticed the footprints, barefoot, human, and eerily deliberate. The prints were spaced evenly, leading in a straight line across the clearing before disappearing into the dense trees on the other side. There were no signs of anyone else in the area, no discarded belongings, no evidence of recent activity. Just those prints. Could be someone lost, Mike muttered, though his tone betrayed his doubt. Sam wasn't so sure. The prints were too precise, too deliberate, and the fact that they ended so abruptly only deepened his unease. They followed the tracks for a while, but like so many other things in the forest, they led to nothing. That night, the forest felt different. The silence, once unnerving, had become oppressive, almost suffocating. As Sam lay in his sleeping bag staring at the faint glow of the fire, the whispers returned. This time, they were closer, clearer, as though they were circling the camp. Sam couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable, urgent, insistent, and deeply unsettling. At one point, Sam thought he heard his own name spoken softly from somewhere in the trees. He sat bolt upright, his flashlight scanning the darkness, but there was nothing. Just the endless rows of trees, their twisted branches swaying in the wind. When he finally fell asleep, it was with the growing certainty that the forest was alive, and it was watching them. On the third night, Sam woke to find the camp in disarray. Their supplies were scattered across the snow, the fire reduced to embers. Mike's sleeping bag was empty, his pack gone. At first, Sam thought he might have wandered off to relieve himself, but as the minutes stretched into hours, his concern grew. Grabbing his flashlight, he followed what little trail Mike had left, a faint path of disturbed snow leading into the trees. The trail led him to a small clearing, where it abruptly stopped. There were no footprints, no sign of a struggle, just an empty expanse of snow and an eerie silence that seemed to press against his ears. Sam called out for Mike, his voice echoing through the trees, but the only response was the wind. By the time morning came, Sam was exhausted and disoriented. His search for Mike had led him far from their original campsite, and he had no idea how to get back. It was then that he stumbled upon the cabin. It was old, its wooden walls weathered and warped, and its roof partially caved in from years of neglect. But it was shelter, and at that moment, it was all Sam needed. Inside, the cabin was just as desolate, broken furniture, a rusted stove, and scattered debris that suggested it had been abandoned for decades. But as Sam explored further, he found something strange. A set of symbols carved into the wooden walls, intricate and deliberate. They didn't match any language he recognized, but they were hauntingly precise, as though they had been made with great care. At first, Sam tried to rationalize the events. The whispers could be the wind, the footprints a lost traveler, and Mike's disappearance the result of an animal attack. After all, the claw marks he'd found on the trees were deep and jagged, consistent with a large predator. But the more he thought about it, the less sense it made. What kind of animal leaves no blood, no struggle, and no tracks leading away? In the corner of the cabin, hidden beneath a pile of debris, Sam found an old journal. The cover was cracked and faded, the pages yellowed with age. The entries were dated from decades earlier and belonged to a man named Henry Clark, a trapper who had lived in the area long before the forest was officially charted. The early entries described a life of solitude and survival, but as the pages went on, the tone changed. Henry began to write about strange occurrences, lights in the woods, voices that called to him in the night. He mentioned seeing figures in the trees, shadowy and silent, always just out of reach. The final entry was the most chilling. I've tried to leave, but it won't let me. The forest has claimed me. If you're reading this, it will claim you too. That night, as Sam huddled in the cabin, the whispers returned. This time, they were louder, more insistent, as though they were coming from all around him. Gripping his flashlight, he peered out the window, scanning the darkness. For a moment, he thought he saw something, a figure standing at the edge of the trees. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, but its presence was undeniable. And then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. Sam knew he couldn't stay in the cabin. The forest was closing in, its secrets tightening their grip. And as the whispers grew louder, one thing became clear. The forest wasn't just dangerous, it was alive, and it wasn't going to let him leave. Sam was alone now. The forest stretched endlessly in every direction, a labyrinth of shadows and snow that seemed to shift and change the deeper he went. The cabin, the journal, the figure that had worn Mike's face, all of it blurred together in his mind, a tangle of fear and unanswered questions. But one thing was clear. The forest wasn't just a setting. It was a predator, and it had been watching him from the moment he stepped inside. In the flickering firelight of the cabin, Sam pored over the journal, desperate for answers. Henry Clark's words painted a grim picture, each entry more unsettling than the last. What had started as a record of hunting trips and daily survival had become a descent into terror. Henry described the same signs Sam had encountered, the footprints, the whispers, the feeling of being watched. But his account went further. He spoke of nights when the forest seemed to close in around him, its silence broken by distant screams, of lights that flickered between the trees, too steady to be natural, yet too random to be man-made. And then came the revelation. The forest wasn't cursed, it was inhabited. Henry called it the mimic. A creature not bound by the laws of nature, one that could imitate voices, faces, even memories. It wasn't a ghost, nor was it an animal. It was something far older, something that thrived on fear and isolation. It would lure its victims deeper into the woods, separating them from safety, from reason, from themselves. And once they were too far gone to fight back, it would take them. Henry's final entry was scrawled in a frantic, almost illegible hand. "It's here. I can feel it. Watching, waiting. It won't let me leave. If you find this, don't look for me. Don't try to save me. Just run." Sam's thoughts snapped back to Mike. The footprints leading away from the campsite. The figure in the cabin, its movements unnatural, its voice hollow. He realized with a sinking feeling that Mike hadn't just disappeared. He'd been taken. And whatever had taken him was still out there, wearing his face, using his voice. "Mike," Sam whispered, as if saying his name could bring him back. But deep down, he knew the truth. Mike was gone, and whatever had replaced him was no longer human. That night, Sam stayed awake, the journal clutched in his hands. The whispers returned, louder and closer than before. They circled the cabin, mingling with the crackling of the dying fire. Some called his name, pleading and desperate. Others were angrier, accusing, taunting. And then he heard it. Mike's voice, clear and unmistakable. "Sam, it's me. Please help me." Sam's grip on the journal tightened. The voice was coming from the trees, just beyond the edge of the firelight. He wanted to believe it, wanted to believe that Mike was still alive. But Henry's warning echoed in his mind. "It will use your fear against you." Just as the whispers seemed to reach their peak, the door to the cabin creaked open. Sam turned, his flashlight trembling in his hand. Standing in the doorway was Mike, or what looked like him. His face was pale, his eyes hollow, and his movements were stiff, almost mechanical. He took a step forward, then another, his gaze fixed on Sam. "You left me," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. "You should have stayed." Sam backed away, his heart pounding. "You're not him," he said, though his voice shook with uncertainty. The figure tilted its head as if considering the statement. Then it smiled, a slow, unnatural curve of the lips that sent a chill down Sam's spine. "No," it said, its voice shifting, distorting. "But I could be." And then it lunged. Sam threw himself backward, the creature's outstretched hands narrowly missing him. He grabbed a burning piece of wood from the fire and swung it wildly, the flames casting erratic shadows across the walls. The creature recoiled its form, flickering like a mirage. Sam didn't wait to see if it would recover. He ran. The cold air hit him like a wall as he burst into the night. The forest was darker than ever, the trees seeming to close in around him. He could hear the creature behind him, its movements unnatural and erratic, alternating between heavy footfalls and eerie silence. And then came the voices again, louder and more insistent. They weren't just whispers anymore. They were screams, cries for help, laughter that didn't belong to any human throat. Every instinct told Sam to give up, to stop running, to let the forest take him. But something deep inside him refused. He thought of the journal, of Henry's final words. He thought of Mike, of the life he had left behind, and of the truth he had come so far to find. And then he thought of the creature. It wasn't just hunting him. It was feeding off his fear. And as long as he was afraid, it would never stop. Sam stumbled into a clearing, the moonlight casting an eerie glow over the snow. He turned, gripping his makeshift torch, and shouted into the darkness. "Come on!" he yelled, his voice raw. "I'm not afraid of you." But his shaking hands betrayed him. The creature stepped into the clearing, its form shifting and flickering like a shadow caught in a storm. It was Mike. Then it was Walter. Then it was Sam himself, staring back at him with eyes that didn't belong. "You feed on fear," Sam said, his voice steadying. "But I'm done being afraid." He dropped the torch, standing his ground as the creature advanced. It hesitated, its movements faltering. "You can't hurt me," Sam continued. "Not if I don't let you." With each word, the creature seemed to shrink its form, unraveling like smoke in the wind. And then, with a final bone-chilling scream, it disappeared. Sam didn't stop running until he saw the first light of dawn. The forest seemed to recede behind him, its oppressive presence lifting as he emerged from the tree line. He collapsed in the snow, gasping for air, the journal clutched tightly in his hand. He had survived. But as he looked back at the dark wall of trees, he knew the forest wasn't done with him. Not yet. Sam had escaped the forest, but escape didn't feel like victory. The silence of the wilderness had been replaced by the hum of civilization. Yet it offered no comfort. The forest still lingered in his mind, its whispers, its shifting shadows, its cold, unyielding grip on his soul. Even as he walked among bustling streets and crowded spaces, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. It took Sam weeks to find his way back to Silver Ridge. The locals barely recognized him when he arrived, disheveled and gaunt, his eyes hollow with exhaustion. They asked no questions, offering only quiet stares and uneasy glances. Perhaps they knew better than to pry. Sam stayed just long enough to gather his belongings before leaving the town for good, vowing never to return. But as he boarded the bus that would take him far from Silver Ridge, a sense of unease crept over him. The whispers had stopped, but their memory was still fresh, and every so often, he thought he heard his name carried on the wind, faint and fleeting, as though the forest hadn't entirely let him go. Sam returned to the city, hoping to bury himself in the noise and chaos of modern life. But the forest had left its mark. In the quiet moments when the world slowed down, he would hear it, an echo of a voice too faint to place but too familiar to ignore. Sometimes it was Mike's voice, calling out to him from the darkness. Other times it was his own voice, whispering things he couldn't bear to repeat. He began to doubt himself. Were these echoes remnants of the forest's trickery, or had the mimic followed him? He avoided mirrors, afraid of what he might see. He stopped answering phone calls, unsure if the voice on the other end would truly be the one he expected. The forest might have released his body, but it had taken something deeper, his trust in the world around him. Sam never wrote about what he experienced in the forest. As a journalist, he had spent his life uncovering hidden truths, but this one was different. He knew that no one would believe him, and even if they did, he wasn't sure it was a truth worth sharing. Some stories aren't meant to be told. Some truths are better left buried. In his quieter moments, Sam thought about Henry Clark and the journal he had left behind. The warning had been clear, but Sam had ignored it, driven by curiosity and the need for answers. Now he understood the cost of that curiosity. The forest wasn't just a place, it was a presence, and it didn't let go. As the years passed, Sam's memories of the forest grew hazy, like a dream fading with the morning light. But the questions remained. Was the mimic a creature of flesh and blood, or was it something more abstract, an embodiment of fear, a manifestation of the mind? Was it real, or was it just the forest playing tricks on a weary traveler? Sam didn't know, and perhaps he didn't want to. He came to understand why the people of Silver Ridge refused to speak about the forest. It wasn't just fear, it was reverence. They knew what he now understood. Some legends are born of truth, and some truths are better left buried. Sam's story may never have a definitive ending. The forest keeps its secrets well, and those who venture too close rarely return with answers. But what do you think? Could there really be something lurking in the remote corners of our world, waiting for those brave or foolish enough to seek it out? Do you believe the mimic is real? Could a creature like this exist, or is it just a tale born of isolation and fear? Let us know in the comments below, and if you've ever experienced something similar, we'd love to hear your story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more chilling tales like this one. Until next time, stay curious, but not too curious. Sam's story ended in survival, but survival isn't the same as escape. The forest left its mark on him, as it does on everyone who enters its domain. So the next time you find yourself in a place where the silence is too deep, where the shadows move just a little too quickly, remember Sam's story, and ask yourself, if the forest calls to you, will you answer?